Thomas Reed stood at the massive window of the Galactic Council chambers, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. Below him, the gleaming spires of Capital World Prime stretched endlessly into the horizon, their crystal surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Even after 15 years as Earth's senior diplomat, the view still took his breath away. But today, something felt different. The air in the council chambers felt heavy, charged with an electricity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. His military training from decades ago, a requirement for all human diplomats, had taught him to trust these instincts. A soft chime announced the arrival of another being. Reed turned to face High Counselor Blue, a tall, willowy creature whose crystalline body structure caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. Like most council species, Blue found Earth's classification as a Class 12 Deathworld both fascinating and terrifying. Ambassador Reed, Blue's translator hummed. "You seem troubled." Reed offered a careful smile, one he had practiced thousands of times. Too wide a smile showed teeth, a sign of aggression to many species. Too small, and it could be interpreted as a sneer. "Just contemplating the Empire's recent movements along our borders, High Counselor." Blue's crystalline form dimmed slightly, their species equivalent of a frown. "The new Emperor is young, aggressive, different from his predecessor." "Different is one word for it," Reed said quietly. He turned back to the window, remembering his first day in these chambers. Back then, most species wouldn't even sit within 10 meters of a human. They'd called humans primitives, barbarians, and worse. But Reed had been patient. Year after year, treaty after treaty, trade deal after trade deal, he had shown them that humans could be reasonable, diplomatic, and valuable allies. The chamber doors slid open again. This time, Imperial guards marched in, their powered armor clanking against the polished floor. Behind them came Imperial Diplomat First Class Silver Wing, his feathered crest raised high with pride. Or was it arrogance? Ambassador Reed, Silver Wing's natural voice scraped like metal on stone. He refused to use a translator when speaking to humans, a small but deliberate insult. Still admiring the view. "Perhaps such technology is overwhelming for your species." Reed turned slowly. He had learned long ago that quick movements made other species nervous. "Not at all, Diplomat Silverwing. I was just reflecting on how far we've all come. When I first arrived, the Empire wouldn't even trade basic medical supplies with Earth. Now we're your 3rd largest trading partner in the Orion Arm." Silverwing's crest flickered, a sign of annoyance. Yes, well, the previous emperor had different views about associating with lesser species. The insult hung in the air. A few years ago, such a comment would have started a diplomatic incident. Now, with the new emperor in power, it was becoming commonplace. Reed simply smiled again, letting the insult roll off him like water off a duck's back. "Lesser species build half the technology in this room," Reed said mildly. "Humanity might be young compared to the Empire, but we've contributed our fair share. Our gravity manipulation technology, for instance." "Primitive applications of borrowed science," Silverwing interrupted. "The Emperor grows tired of pretending that species from backwater deathworlds deserve equal standing in the Council." The chamber fell silent. Even the Imperial guards shifted uncomfortably. Blue's crystalline form had darkened to almost black, a sign of extreme distress. Reed maintained his diplomatic smile, but his eyes hardened. He thought of Earth, of its brutal gravity, its extreme weather, its countless predators that had forged humanity in fire and blood. He thought of how hard they had worked to rise above their violent origins, to prove they could be more than just survivors of a death world. "The Empire's opinion is noted," Reed said finally. "But remember, Diplomat Silverwing, species from death worlds don't just survive. We thrive. We adapt. We overcome. It's what we do best." The threat wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. Silverwing's crest raised even higher, but before he could respond, the council chamber alerts began to flash. The day's session was about to begin. As they took their seats, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. 15 years of peace felt suddenly fragile, like a soap bubble ready to pop. He had worked too hard, come too far, to let it all fall apart now. But as he watched Silverwing strut to the Empire's seat, Reed remembered an old Earth saying, "Hope for peace, prepare for war." And if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was prepare for war. Reed's morning began like any other. He sat at his desk in the Earth Embassy, reviewing trade reports and border patrol logs. His coffee, real Earth coffee, a luxury out here, had grown cold. Something didn't feel right about the patrol reports. Too many Imperial ships have been moving near human space in the past week. The emergency alarm shattered his thoughts. Red lights flashed across his office as screens burst to life on every wall. Reed's coffee cup crashed to the floor as he jumped to his feet. What he saw made his blood freeze. Imperial warships were everywhere. The screens showed feed after feed of massive Imperial dreadnoughts appearing near human colonies. Their black hulls blocked out the stars, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. Before Reed could even process what he was seeing, the first shots were fired. "No," he whispered. "God, no." The colony of New Hope was hit first. The Imperial ships didn't target military installations or defense platforms. Instead, they aimed at civilian areas, housing districts, schools, hospitals. Buildings crumbled under the assault. Emergency broadcasts filled the air with screams and panic. Reed's hands shook as he slammed the emergency communication button. "Get me Earth Command. Now." But the channels were being jammed. The Empire had planned this well. They weren't just attacking. They were cutting off all communication, all chances for help or coordination. The door to his office burst open. James, his young assistant, rushed in. His face was white with shock. "Sir, the Empire, they're hitting everything. New Hope, Haven's Gate, Frontier's Edge, all our border colonies." Reed had already started moving. "Get me a secure line to the Council. And find High Counselor Blue. The Empire can't do this without consequences. There are treaties, agreements." "Sir," James interrupted, his voice breaking. "The Council, they're claiming they have no authority to intervene. They're calling it an internal security matter between Earth and the Empire." Reed stopped dead in his tracks. 15 years of work. 15 years of building trust, making allies, proving that humans could be diplomatic. All of it meant nothing. The main screen switched to a new broadcast. Imperial Diplomat Silverwing's feathered face filled the screen, his crest raised in triumph. "This is a message to all Council species," Silverwing announced. "The Galactic Empire is taking necessary preemptive action against the human threat. These Deathworlders have hidden their true nature behind masks of diplomacy for too long. We have evidence of their secret military buildup, their plans to..." Reed cut off the transmission. His hands had stopped shaking. The cold fury of a Deathworlder was taking over, replacing shock with deadly calm. "James," he said quietly, "get me everything we have on the Empire's ship movements from the past month, and contact our special channels." James nodded, understanding. While Reed had spent 15 years building official diplomatic ties, he had also created a network of unofficial ones. Species who hated the Empire's arrogance, groups who had suffered similar betrayals. They had shared information, quietly helped each other, waited for a day they hoped would never come. A new alert flashed across the screens. The death toll on New Hope had passed 10,000. Reed watched as Imperial ships systematically destroyed everything humans had built on their colony worlds. His office door opened again. This time it was Linda from Intelligence, carrying a secure data pad. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Sir, Earth Command is activating Protocol Omega," she said. "They're asking if you want to proceed with the response." Reed looked at the screens one last time. At the burning colonies, the destroyed homes, the shattered peace. He thought of all the times he had sat in council meetings, smiling politely while the Empire looked down on humans as primitive barbarians. They had never understood what it meant to come from a death world. They had mistaken patience for weakness, diplomacy for fear. "Yes," he said, his voice hard as steel. "Tell Command I'm initiating the response, and get me a direct line to the council chambers." It's time they learned why Earth is called a death world. As Linda rushed out, Reed walked to his window. The capital world's 3 suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of blood red. By tomorrow, the galaxy would remember why you should never push a death worlder into a corner. The Empire had wanted war. Now they would learn what war with humans really meant. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled, but no one made a sound as Thomas Reed walked to the center platform. His black diplomatic uniform was perfectly pressed, showing no sign of the sleepless night he had spent watching his colonies burn. The Empire section sat empty. They hadn't even bothered to send a representative. Reed stood at the podium, looking at the faces he had known for 15 years. Some couldn't meet his eyes. Others watched with fear or pity or carefully hidden interest. Honored council members, Reed's voice was calm, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "I stand before you today, not as Earth's diplomat, but as Earth's last warning." He pressed a button on the podium. The chamber's massive screens came to life, showing the destruction of human colonies, children's hospitals in ruins, civilian shelters targeted, rescue ships shot down. 24 hours ago, the Empire launched what they called a preemptive security action against human territories, Reed continued. They murdered 300,000 civilians. They destroyed 5 colonies. They broke every treaty they ever signed. High Counselor Blue's crystalline form dimmed with distress. "Ambassador Reed, while these actions are regrettable, the Council cannot interfere in what the Empire claims is a security matter." "I'm not finished," Reed cut in. His voice hadn't changed, but something in it made everyone freeze. "You see, while I spent 15 years practicing diplomacy, I was also practicing something else. Something humans are very, very good at, gathering intelligence." He pressed another button. A new recording played. This one from inside the Empire's War Council, taken just 3 days ago. The Emperor himself spoke of plans for genocide, of wiping out all human colonies, of making an example of the Death World barbarians. The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Reed let them talk for a moment before raising his hand. "But that's not the most important recording I have," he said. The screens changed again, showing Imperial officials meeting secretly with representatives from other worlds. Making deals, promising territories, planning more conquests. "The Empire doesn't plan to stop with Earth," Reed explained. "We're just the first. They think if they can defeat the Death Worlders, no one else will dare resist." The whispers turned to frightened murmurs. Reed watched faces change as council members recognized their own officials in the recordings, caught plotting with the Empire against their neighbors. "For 15 years, Reed continued, you've all wondered why humans work so hard at diplomacy. You thought we were trying to prove we weren't savages, that we were desperate to be accepted." He shook his head slowly. "You were wrong. We chose diplomacy because we know, better than any species here, what the alternative costs. On Earth, we evolved alongside predators that would make your nightmares seem pleasant. We survived ice ages, plagues, and our own wars. We didn't become apex predators by chance." Reed's voice grew harder. "You've all made the same mistake the Empire did. You mistook our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for fear, our restraint for lack of power." He pulled out his diplomatic credentials and placed them on the podium. "As of this moment, Earth withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Empire. We are now in a state of war." He looked around the chamber. "Choose your next actions carefully. Because while the Empire forgot what it means to face a Death World species in combat, you're all about to remember." Reed started walking toward the exit, But at the chamber doors, he turned one last time. "One final thing," he said. "The Empire thinks they know about human weapons. Human ships, human defenses." A cold smile crossed his face. "They don't. What they've seen, what we've shown everyone, is exactly what we wanted them to see. Nothing more." The doors slid open, and Earth's last diplomat stepped through them. Behind him, the council chambers descended into chaos. Species that had looked down on humans for years suddenly remembered their history, remembered why Deathworld species were classified as extreme threats, remembered what humans had evolved to be: survivors at any cost. As Reed walked away, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the capital. The first reports were coming in of human ships appearing near Imperial space. The Empire had wanted to learn what humanity was capable of. They were about to find out. The Imperial Admiral stood proudly on his flagship's bridge, watching his fleet patrol the borders of the Empire's largest shipyard. 3 days had passed since their attack on the human colonies, and still no response. Perhaps the Deathworlders weren't as dangerous as everyone thought. "Admiral," a young officer called out, "we're detecting some strange readings from the nearby asteroid field." The Admiral waved his feathered hand dismissively. "Probably just mining drones. The humans are too weak to." The rest of his words died in his throat. Hundreds of asteroids suddenly changed course, their rocky surfaces falling away to reveal sleek, black ships. Human ships, far more advanced than anything the Empire had ever seen them use. "Impossible," the Admiral whispered. "Their technology level. We monitored everything they built." On the command ship of the human fleet, Reed stood watching tactical displays. He wore a different uniform now, dark gray combat gear with Earth Defense Force insignia. Around him, human officers coordinated the attack with cold efficiency. "All ships report ready, sir," his tactical officer reported. "The Empire still hasn't detected our stealth systems." Reed nodded. For 15 years, humans had hidden their true military power. Every ship they showed the galaxy had been deliberately outdated. Every weapon they displayed had been generations behind what they really had. Now, finally, the mask was coming off. "Begin Operation Revenge," Reed ordered. The human ships moved with devastating speed. Their weapons were nothing like the primitive plasma cannons the Empire thought they used. Instead, gravity itself bent to human will, crushing Imperial ships like paper toys. Quantum torpedoes phased through the strongest shields as if they weren't there. The Admiral watched in horror as his fleet died in seconds. Send distress calls. Get reinforcements. But no help would come. At that exact moment, human strikes hit every major Imperial communication relay in the sector. The Empire's rigid command structure, which they had always seen as a strength, became their weakness. Without orders from above, their ships and bases didn't know how to respond. Reed walked to the front of his bridge, watching the battle unfold. "Phase 2, he commanded. New ships appeared, emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. The Empire had never imagined humans had mastered fold space technology. They had assumed Earth's few jump gates were bought from other species. They were wrong. The Imperial shipyard's defenders fell quickly. But Reed wasn't interested in just destroying ships. His fleet surrounded the massive facility, their weapons precisely targeting specific systems. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we have control of their main computer systems, downloading all ship designs and construction data now." Reed allowed himself a small smile. The Empire hadn't just attacked Earth. They had given humans an excuse to take everything they had. Every secret, every technology, every advantage would now become a weapon against them. The shipyard's commander appeared on the main screen, his feathers flat with fear. "Please," he begged. "We surrender. Show mercy." "Mercy?" Reed's voice was cold. "Like the mercy you showed our colonies, our children." He turned to his communications officer. "Send them the footage. Show them what they did to New Hope." The Imperial commander watched in horror as images of his fleet's attack on human civilians played on every screen in the shipyard. Many of his officers turned away, unable to watch. "We're not going to kill you," Reed said finally. "We're going to let you live. Let you report back to your emperor. Let you explain how completely you underestimated us." The human fleet began to move away, leaving the crippled shipyard behind. But they weren't retreating. Other targets waited: Imperial supply lines, training bases, fuel refineries. Everything the Empire had built would become a target. In his private quarters later, Reed watched recordings of the battle. The Empire had thought they were punishing unruly primitives. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous: humans fighting to protect their own. His computer chimed. More reports were coming in from across Imperial space. Other human fleets were striking other targets. The Emperor's perfect realm was beginning to crack. Reed thought of all the times he had sat quietly in council meetings, listening to Imperial officials boast about their power. They had never understood the old Earth saying, "Beware the fury of a patient man." Now they would learn. The real war was just beginning. Reed sat in a dimly lit room aboard his command ship, studying reports of recent battles. The human fleets had struck 30 Imperial targets in just 5 days. But he knew they needed more than just military victories to win this war. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. His assistant James entered, followed by 3 hooded figures. "Sir," James said quietly, "they're here." Reed stood as the figures lowered their hoods. He recognized them immediately: representatives from species the Empire had long oppressed. The reptilian trade master Longtooth, the crystalline ambassador Spark, and the insectoid hive commander Click. "Welcome," Reed said. "I assume you received our message." Longtooth stepped forward, his scales shimmering in the low light. "We watched your attack on the Imperial shipyard. Impressive. Very impressive. But why call us here?" Reed pressed a button on his desk. A hologram appeared, showing the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Imperial territory, while blue showed human space. But there were other colors too, dozens of them, representing every species the Empire had ever threatened or controlled. Because, Reed said, winning battles isn't enough. We need to break the Empire's power completely. And for that, we need allies. Click's antennae twitched with interest. The Empire has ruled through fear for centuries. Why should we believe humans can change that? Instead of answering, Reed played a recording. It showed human ships defending a small trading post belonging to Longtooth's people from Imperial raiders. Another recording showed human agents helping Spark's people smuggle refugees to safety. For 15 years, Reed explained, while playing the part of simple diplomats, we've been preparing, building networks, helping those who suffered under Imperial rule. Now it's time to bring it all into the open. Ambassador Spark's crystalline form glowed with surprise. "Those rescue ships, that was you. We thought they were just brave merchants." Reed smiled. "Humans are very good at looking like something we're not. The Empire thought they were watching us. Instead, we were watching them, learning their weaknesses, finding their victims, building connections." He stood and walked to the hologram. "Each of your species has suffered under Imperial rule. Each of you has fighters ready to rise up. All you need is support and protection from Imperial retaliation, which you can provide." Longtooth asked, but his eyes showed he already knew the answer. "We can do more than that," Reed said. He touched the hologram, and new lines appeared: trade routes, hyperspace paths, defense networks. "We can give you weapons, training, ships, everything you need to defend yourselves." Click moved closer to the hologram. "The Empire's fleet is still massive, even with your advanced technology." "We don't need to match their numbers," Reed interrupted. "We just need to be smarter. Humans learned warfare on a death world, remember? We know how to fight bigger, stronger enemies." He pressed another button. The hologram showed Imperial supply lines, command centers, and weak points. The Empire fights like an empire. Slow, rigid, predictable. We'll fight like survivors. Strike where they're weak. Disappear when they're strong. Turn their size against them. The three representatives looked at each other. Years of imperial oppression had taught them caution. But years of watching humans had also taught them something else. When humans made promises, they kept them. "What exactly are you proposing?" Spark asked. "An alliance," Reed said simply. "Equal partners, shared technology, mutual defense, and a chance to build something better than the Empire ever imagined." He let them see the full battle plan, how human stealth technology could hide their resistance fighters, how Earth's gravity weapons could protect their worlds, how together they could turn the Empire's iron grip into its greatest weakness. One by one, they agreed. Longtooth offered his hunting grounds as hidden bases. Spark's people promised their crystal technology. Click's hive warriors pledged their strength. As they left, James turned to Reed. "Sir, do you really think we can win? The Empire still controls most of the galaxy." Reed watched the hologram, where new alliance signals were already appearing. "The Empire built its power through fear and force," he said. "We'll break it with something stronger. Hope." The hologram kept glowing, showing more and more species joining the alliance. The Empire had wanted war. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous: unity. The real revolution was just beginning. The Emperor's throne room fell silent as the latest battle reports arrived. 6 months of war had changed everything. Half his mighty empire was in flames. The Alliance, led by those cursed humans, struck everywhere at once. Every defeat brought more systems into open rebellion. "Impossible," he screamed, throwing the reports across the room. "They're just primitives, barbarians." His advisors cowered before him. Only High General Wings dared to speak. "My Emperor, we have one option left: the void weapons." Everyone in the room froze. The void weapons were forbidden by every law in the galaxy. Weapons that could tear apart reality itself. "Use them," the Emperor commanded. "Target Earth directly. Show these Deathworlders what real power looks like." On his command ship, Reed studied tactical displays showing the Alliance's progress. Click's hive warriors had just liberated 3 more systems. Longtooth's hunters had destroyed another Imperial supply base. Spark's crystal ships provided perfect stealth coverage for their operations. "Sir," his sensor officer suddenly shouted. Multiple Imperial ships jumping in. Massive energy readings. Reed's blood ran cold as he recognized the readings. "They wouldn't dare," he whispered, but the Empire had already proven they would dare anything. The Imperial fleet emerged from jump space near Earth. At their center was a massive ship carrying the forbidden void weapons, weapons that could crack planets, swallow stars, break the laws of physics themselves. "All ships, battle stations," Reed commanded. "Get me the Alliance fleet, and someone wake up Earth Defense Command." But before anyone could react, space itself seemed to tear open. A massive Imperial ship emerged, bigger than anything they'd seen before. On its sides were massive black cylinders. The void weapons. The Emperor's face appeared on every screen in human space. "Surrender now, primitives, or watch your world die." Reed's response was immediate. "All Alliance ships, execute Operation Endgame. Authorization code: Phoenix Rising." Suddenly, the space around Earth rippled. Massive defense platforms appeared, dropping their stealth fields. Weapons humanity had hidden for decades revealed themselves. The Earth's moon itself seemed to change, sections of its surface opening to reveal huge gun batteries. "You're not the only ones with forbidden weapons," Reed transmitted back. "We just chose not to use them. Until now." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. Imperial ships fired their void weapons, trying to tear reality apart. But human quantum shields, combined with Spark's crystal technology, bent the laws of physics back into place. Longtooth's hunters struck from impossible angles, while Click's hive warriors swarmed the Imperial ships. Reed stood on his bridge, coordinating everything. Target their flagship. All ships, focus fire. The Alliance fleet moved like one organism. Human gravity weapons crushed Imperial shields. Crystal beams sliced through hull armor. Hive warriors boarded the massive ships, fighting through corridors while hunters picked off escape pods. The Emperor watched in horror as his mighty fleet died around him. Fire everything. Destroy them all. But his words came too late. The Alliance had planned this moment for months. As the Imperial fleet focused on Earth, human stealth ships appeared behind them. The Emperor's flagship found itself caught in a perfect trap. "This is your last chance," Reed transmitted. "Surrender, and we'll show more mercy than you did to our colonies." The Emperor's response was to fire another void weapon. But this time, something went wrong. The weapon backfired, starting a chain reaction that began tearing his flagship apart. Reed watched as the massive Imperial ship began to break up. All ships, pull back. Rescue operations only. The Alliance fleet retreated to safe distance, picking up escape pods, even Imperial ones. They watched as the Emperor's mighty flagship tore itself apart, taking the forbidden weapons with it. Hours later, Reed stood in his ready room, watching Earth shine below. The Empire's last desperate gambit had failed. Their strongest weapons had been turned against them. Their fleet was in ruins. His communication officer's voice came through. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from Imperial worlds across the galaxy. The Emperor's dead. The Empire, it's over." Reed nodded slowly. The war wasn't completely finished. There would be Imperial holdouts, desperate last stands, true believers who wouldn't give up. But the back of the Empire's power was broken. They had started this war thinking humans were primitive barbarians. They had learned, too late, why Earth was called a death world. Not just because of its dangers, but because of what those dangers had created. A species that never, ever gave up. The real work, building something better than the Empire, was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the Empire's fall. The Galactic Council chambers looked different now. Gone were the towering Imperial thrones. Gone were the symbols of Imperial power. Instead, representatives from all species sat at a round table, equal in height and position. Reed stood at the window of his old office, watching ships from 100 different worlds move through the capital's skyways. He wore his diplomatic uniform again, though his combat medals now decorated its chest. "Hard to believe it's been a year," James said, bringing in the morning reports. "Remember when we used to beg for meetings in these chambers?" Reed smiled. "Now look at us, humans, coordinating galactic reconstruction." He picked up the first report. "How are the former Imperial worlds doing?" "Better than expected. The Alliance's aid programs are working. Even the most damaged planets should be rebuilt within 5 years. A soft chime announced visitors. Longtooth, Spark, and Click entered, no longer hiding in shadows, but walking proudly as leaders of the new Galactic Alliance. "The final charter is ready," Spark announced, crystal form glowing brightly. "All member worlds have agreed to the terms." Reed took the document, actual paper, and Earth tradition he had insisted on for this historic moment. The Galactic Alliance Charter was simple but powerful. Every species had equal rights. Every world had protection. No more empires, no more oppression. "Hard to believe we did it," Longtooth rumbled, scales gleaming in the sunlight. "Overthrew the Empire, united the galaxy, all because they underestimated one Death World species." "Not just us," Reed corrected. "We provided the spark. But everyone here fought for this. Everyone sacrificed." Click's antennae twitched in agreement. "Still, your strategy was brilliant, hiding your true strength all those years. Building secret alliances, preparing for a war you hoped would never come." Reed walked to a new addition in his office, a large terrarium containing an earth oak sapling. The small tree was a symbol of their new approach. Strength through growth, not conquest. "The Empire never understood," he said, checking the sapling soil. They thought coming from a death world made us primitive. They didn't realize it made us patient, cautious, always preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. A hologram appeared above his desk, live feeds from across the galaxy. Former Imperial worlds learning to govern themselves. Alliance ships helping rebuild destroyed colonies. Trade routes reopening. Cultures mixing. New friendships forming. The real victory isn't military, Reed continued. It's this. Different species working together, learning from each other, building something better than the Empire ever imagined. He pressed a button, and a hologram changed to show Earth. His home world looked peaceful from space, its dangers hidden beneath blue oceans and white clouds. We're still strengthening our defenses, James reported. Some Imperial loyalists are still out there, but they're finding fewer and fewer places to hide. Reed nodded. They had learned their lesson about letting guards down. The Alliance maintained a strong defense fleet, combining human stealth technology, crystal ship designs, hunter tactics, and hive warrior courage. The council session begins in 10 minutes. Spark reminded them. The official charter signing. As they walked to the council chambers, Reed saw how much had changed. Species that once feared each other now worked side by side. Former enemies shared jokes and stories. The fear that had ruled under the Empire was gone. Inside the chambers, representatives from every Alliance world waited. Reed took his place, not at the head of the table, but as one equal among many. 1 year ago, he began, we gathered here in war. Today, we gather in peace. Not peace through force, as the Empire sought, but peace through understanding, through respect, through unity. He lifted the charter. This document ensures no species will ever dominate another again. No world will face destruction alone. No voice will go unheard. One by one, the representatives signed. When it was done, Reed planted the oak sapling in the council's central garden. Around it, other species added their own plants, a garden of unity. The Empire thought they were superior, Reed said quietly. They never understood that true strength comes from working together, from turning enemies into friends, from building instead of destroying. As 3 suns set outside, the garden glowed with bioluminescent flowers from a dozen worlds. The end of Empire, the beginning of Alliance. And watching over it all, an oak sapling from a death world, growing strong and tall under alien suns.